All right, it's officially mock draft season. Love mock draft season, so I figured let me give my first mock draft. And this is very much the idea was I was going to kind of make it as I go along. I was going to, do the draft and kind of discuss these things as we go along, get my first reactions to it. Unfortunately, as I did that, the audio was not great. I had an issue with that, and I had to reshoot the whole thing. So this is my reshooting of it. So I've already done the whole draft at this point, but this was my kind of first attempt at a mock draft. Figure let's throw it out there, open to feedback, as I don't think every one of these picks makes 100% sense, but this is just the first thing that made sense to me when I was doing it. So we're going to go four at a time. Let's just get into it. First things first, the top four. I think the top two are, I guess I shouldn't say that. Top one is a given. I've yet to see someone not put Caleb Williams at number one. That feels like a lock. Number two was a lock for a while. There are people there's the Jaden Daniels hive out there, which I'm just not quite as high on Daniels, and we'll get into it when we get into it. But I like Daniels. He is on this list. He did make the first round for sure, but just not quite as high as some other people do, which you notice with number three. Marvin Harrison. I'm not doing trades on this one, so went with Marvin Harrison. I think that he's I don't love any of these other quarterback prospects enough to take them over what I consider to be like generational prospects, or at least like, I don't know, blue chip prospects, I should say, at other positions. And then Malik Neighbors, I mean, it's obvious, right? They're going to get Marvin Harrison Jr. unless he is drafted ahead of him, and then they're going to get Malik Neighbors. Feels like that's what everyone agrees with, and it's what they should do. They need a receiver. There's great receivers. They're high up in the draft. It's kind of a lock. The next four on the list, I think this is where I'm going to get some takes that people are going to disagree with because I think a lot of times you see mock drafts really put an emphasis on need and drafting for need. Again, this is what I would do, and I just don't believe in drafting for need. What I believe in is I think you should draft the player that you think is the best player available unless there's a specific reason not to, given your roster constructed. So I think you could maybe not draft a player because you're so good in that area, you don't want another player in that area. You'd rather go somewhere else. But essentially, if you're just drafting for need, you're taking a worse player than you would have, right? So I like Joe Alt better than Rome Odunze, although I like both of them. If I took Rome Odunze, I'm essentially just taking a worse player, in my opinion. Now, you might like Odunze better, that's fine. But, I went for the Chargers. I did go Joe Alt here, which is, I think that, hey, Slater and Alt are now an elite tackle tandem. You can bump someone inside if you have to. I think that would be a good move. And Rome Odunze for the Giants, which I'm sure they were a little nervous when the Chargers were on the clock. Are they going to end up with none of the top three receivers? Feels like they're going to end up getting whoever falls. But Odunze was next highest on my board. And the next two players were also the next highest on my board. Byron Murphy is a bit of a controversial opinion, I think, with the fact that the Titans do have other needs. But again, I'm sorry, Simmons next to Byron Murphy, that's amazing. That's awesome. I want to see that happen. Like, why not be great at something? And that would be, an elite interior defensive line. And then Zerhan Newton, Falcons could use an interior defensive lineman. I don't think this is that hot of a take. Newton was next highest on my board. He was also, I believe next highest on PFF's big board at that point. So kind of, that one feels like it makes sense. I'm sure someone will disagree because someone disagrees with all of these, but that's what I feel there. Next four, there's some, again, number 9 is one I think people will disagree with as well, but hear me out on Brock Bowers to Chicago. My logic was, I think he's kind of the last. I think there is a bit of a tier jump after him. I think you're getting a worse player, in my opinion, if you're drafting someone who isn't Brock Bowers. I'm not doing trades, so there's no way out of it. And well, yes, they have a tight end. They have Cole Kmet. In an ideal scenario, I'd rather trade down a little bit for Chicago, and I think you would have a team be, in my opinion, like if I'm, a team that could use tight end, like I would trade up to get Bowers. So I think you could figure something out there. I just think that it's not worth drafting a worse player just for getting a better need when you're already a rebuilding team anyway. You can run 2 tight end sets. It's fine. You can make that work. I'm going to assume they're going to want to run the ball a lot anyway. So I think that's fine. Number 10, Talise Fuaga, who I have higher on my board than not everybody else that's left to be drafted, but any other offensive lineman. I think that he can play guard or tackle, which could really come in handy for the Jets, who have have, a couple of 100-year-old offensive linemen out there. Getting depth there is so important. You could go receiver, but it would be a bit of a reach for me for any of the other receivers at this point. So again, a trade down would be great, but you can get a receiver in round 2 as well. And then we have a bit of a quarterback run. Michael Penix Jr. is my next favorite quarterback. I know that's a controversial opinion. I know a lot of people prefer Daniels. That's fine. Quarterbacks are hard to evaluate. We just disagree. It is what it is. Again, I've made film studies kind of explaining my thoughts, although I do think they're pretty similar. J.J. McCarthy was also, I'm going to go with Broncos. Why not? You need a quarterback. If he falls to you, take him. I wouldn't trade up for a guy like McCarthy, but I think if he falls to you at 12, I have no issue with this selection, and maybe even a slight trade up if you're not giving up too much to do it. And next 4, we do have Jaden Daniels going here. Again, he quarterback 5, but I have him still my 13th favorite prospect. It's just there's so many good quarterback prospects. Reminds me a bit of the Justin Fields situation where I ended up having him, I believe, as my quarterback 6, but I was like, I still kind of like him as a prospect. There's other quarterbacks I like more. Granted, was still too low on Fields, or maybe too high on some other players would be the better way to phrase that one. Again, not going to bat 1,000 here, but moving on. Again, I think the Raiders, yes, they have Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. Neither one of those guys are, I think, gotta keep those guys. Those are the cornerstone pieces. I don't think they should. I don't know if they're going to. I don't know if they should trade up. Maybe you could. But if you're not going to trade up, I think at the very least, if someone falls to you, I think take him there makes sense. And then we have Le'Veon Latu for the Saints. That's not a hot take. He's a good player. This is the round when people have him going. He totally would fit for the Saints. As a Bucs fan, I would hate this pick, so that means it's a good pick if this for the Saints to do. So this is 15 is going to be probably my hottest take. I really like Kool-Aid McKinstry. He's someone who, I do have him. Spoiler alert for the podcast, but I have him as my number 1 corner. I think he's really good. I think that he's someone who is not. I don't know why he's not really getting enough credit, but I'll probably make a film study elaborating it further. I just think he's a great player. Like, he's next highest on my board. This isn't like a reach for need or anything. Like, this is. I just like him. Jackson Powers Johnson, again, I think he's really good. Was also next highest on my board, and the Seahawks could use a center, so why not? Next 4, Olu Fashanu goes at number 17. And honestly, for Seattle, I could have flipped the 2, but I feel like Seattle has tackles and maybe would rather a center. I do have Fashanu as slightly higher in my board, but they're very close, which is why I went with Powers Johnson, but I could be talked out of that. Again, Jaguars technically have tackles, but they could use another tackle. If worst case scenario, all 3 end up being good next year, then good. You have 3 tackles. That's not a disaster scenario. Cincinnati, lost to Wouzier, so getting Quinyon Mitchell feels like a good replacement there. He was also next highest on my board. Another hot take with Chop Robinson at 19. But again, I like him. I think he'll be able to rush the passer really well. I'm really a fan of Chop Robinson and think he's an underrated player. And just a fun name, Chop Robinson. How can you not be good with a name like that? J.C. Latham, Steelers could use an offensive lineman. Next highest player on my board was an offensive lineman, so it works out there. Next for 21, this is a fun one. Brian Thomas Jr. going to the Miami Dolphins. I know, again, is it going to happen? I don't know. Probably not. But it's interesting how many different takes I've seen with the Dolphins. And I haven't watched a lot of mock drafts, but I've seen a lot of people mocking quarterback here. Listen, I get that they have Jalen Waddle. I get that they have Tyreek Hill. But, I do think that they have kind of struggled with depth at that position, and why not, try to generate one of the best wide receiving cores we've ever seen. Tampa Bay won a Super Bowl because, yes, they had Tom Brady, but also because they had Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Antonio Brown, right? If you can get 3 great receivers, I think Thomas doesn't have to be a number 1. I don't know how much I love him in the slot, but they don't have to do that because Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill can be great out of the slot as well. Maybe you'd like a little bit more versatility, and I suspect they'll end up just drafting a guy in round 2 or 3, but if he's available, he was next highest on my board, that's what I'm doing. Nate Wiggins, Jared Versay was actually next highest on my board at that point, but I decided to still go with Wiggins just because it's similar, and I think he's more of a need. So again, I'll do it like that. Especially once we get kind of later, I'm more willing to draft for need, especially when we get rounds 2 and 3. Then I think drafting for need makes more sense. But this high, I just don't like it. Number 23 on the list, I went with Jalen Versey to the Vikings. It was essentially just they have enough holes. Whoever best player available is, just draft that. I gave him a quarterback with Penix, so now we're going with this here. And then Graham Barton, who is a tackle, but really he's a center, I think, going to the Dallas. They could use him, so that's what I went with. Next, I was in between Terrion Arnold or Dallas Turner for Green Bay. I was kind of debating them. Green Bay did just draft Lucas. I kind of feel like they have potentially both issues solved, maybe. So it's kind of like a weird thing. I decided to just go with Terrion Arnold. I think that's a bit more of a position of need, and it's so close that I went with that. I could be talked into Dallas Turner there, but I also kind of think for Tampa Bay, they should just draft whichever one of those two is left. So they went with Dallas Turner. You could flip those two if you wanted to, the two Alabama players. And it's a Rakestraw Jr. I decided to go with for Arizona, who next highest on my board. And again, they should probably just draft whoever's highest on their board with both for their first two picks, as long as it's not a quarterback. So went with that, and I think he's a good player. Cooper DeJean, someone who a lot of people like. Some people, I think he's like top 10 on PFF's big board. I don't know about that, but I still like him. I think it'd be a worthwhile selection right here at number 28. Finally, number 29 for the Lions. I actually really kind of struggled with this. I went with Tyler Nubin, but like you could go several different directions. Like I'm not married to that whatsoever. But I don't know. I guess they could use a safety. I think he could fit that scheme well. Safety's not even like their biggest position of need, but I don't know. I like him as a player. I decided to go with him there. Don't feel, Lions fans, let me know. Would you have rather someone else in this spot? Ravens fans, I think initially are going to say this is a massive reach. Jackson, you're an idiot. What are you doing? And again, probably you should wait till round 2 if you're trying to get Edger and Cooper. Probably, but he was next highest on my board. It's not a reach for me. I really like him as a player, and I think it's a perfect scheme fit. He can do a lot of what Patrick Queen could do, and could be a really good replacement for Patrick Queen. So it's not just drafting for need here, but I also think he fits in need, and it's a really good player. So this is kind of one of those perfect scenarios for me, although I know a lot of Ravens fans will disagree. The 49ers at 31, I think most people think they're going to go offensive line. Amarius Mims was, I believe, close to the next highest on my board, if not next highest, so decided to just go with him. Kind of fits there. And then the Chiefs, feels like Ladd McConkey is getting mocked here in a lot of mock drafts, and it makes sense. He's a very good player, kind of does what I think they want him to do. Yes, they have missed on Sky Moore, who is kind of a similar, archetype of player, but, again, just because one player missed doesn't mean that you should never draft that kind of player again. I think it would be a good fit. It's interesting. The Chiefs actually have several needs, which is weird. Usually you don't get a team that wins back-to-back Super Bowls and has a decent amount of needs. They do have a decent amount of needs, but getting McConkey here would help fix one of those needs, in my opinion. So, yeah, that's my mock draft. Let me know in the comments below. What do you disagree with? Because, without a doubt, someone will say something in the comments that I'll read and say, oh, yeah, that's actually a good point. Like, you're probably right about that. Because it's the first mock draft. There's so much information you have to talk about with this stuff. And again, it's what I would do, not what I think would happen. But yeah, those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.